Hey, Steve Magnante here at High-Octane Classics in Auburn, Massachusetts with a 1988 Chevy Monte Carlo Super Sport. Now, if you didn't know, the Super Sport was basically the Monte Carlo's NASCAR homologation special. And the Super Sport only got this very special aero nose, which has more of a slope to it than the blunt nose on a regular Monte Carlo LS base car. But again, this is strictly on the SS Aero and the Aero Coupe, which actually is a cousin to this car here. But the Monte Carlo SS had this special nose right here, which was homologated for use on NASCAR super speedways. A lot of racers use these things to cheat the wind all the better than the blunt nose on a lesser Monte Carlo. Now, these were very special cars. Under the hood, these all have a 305, but a very special 305, the L69. We'll look at that in just a second. Now, you got to remember that back in the 1970s, the Monte Carlo could be had with a 454, and it was a Monte Carlo SS 454 in 1970, 71, and 72. But this ain't one of them. But again, the SS moniker on this was about as good as things got in the mid-1980s when the smog wars were really in full bloom, but cars like this were still exciting. And the good thing about these is they were all automatics. With that said, no stick shifts, except for some sold in Mexico. You never find them here. But with that said, 4-speed cars, Monte Carlo SSs in Mexico, they built a handful of them. But these were all stateside automatic cars. And the thing about these is the graphics package on these really lights you up. In the same way that Pontiac learned how much decals can sell Pontiac Trans Ams, Chevy got hip to the action with the graphics package here, the tape stripes all the way around, pinstriping around the wheel opening. And speaking of the wheels, these are the 15-inch wheels that arrived on the Monte Carlo SS. They're aluminum and very good handling. The F41 suspension, standard equipment on the Monte Carlo SS. This one does not have the optional T-tops, which is fine by me. They tend to leak and rust over time. But this one here has just under 80,000 miles, 778,000 miles, and a very crisp example of the breed. And again, 1988 was the final year for the rear-wheel drive Monte Carlo and Monte Carlo SS. And keep in mind, the Monte Carlo SS was built between 1983 and 1988, and in total between those years, there were 154,685 of these made. They were very popular, also very expensive, second only to the IROC-C and the Corvette in price and status on the Chevrolet lot dealership. So let's look inside this one and see which, well, let's look under the hood first. That's where the money is. So let's pop that hood and see what's going on with that L69 305. Okay, under that steel hood is the mighty L69 with 180 horsepower. And that's net horsepower, not gross horsepower, so it's realistic numbers. And in the drag strip, these should probably go about 15.5, which is not terrible for something built in the 1980s at the height of the emissions era. And again, these have an aluminum intake manifold that they painted it black from the factory, crazy but true, but those are painted black right there. That's the aluminum intake. It's a dual plane, and there's a quadrijet, a Rochester quadrijet 4-barrel carb underneath that, and it's fed by a zip tube here, shades of the old W30 from the 1966 model year, but again, cool air is wherever you find it, and here behind the grill, nice source of cool air right there. It's not a ram effect, but it's basically cooler air than what's under the hood. Probably good for about, 10 horsepower versus a hot underhood environment on an August day in Scottsdale, Arizona. But again, very pure under the hood. Ironically, no air conditioning, just a heater. That's okay with me. Quite often air conditioning just adds weight. I say roll the windows down if you're too hot, or drive a little faster. Make sure you obey the speed limit, don't speed. But anyway, here it is, a very pure 1988 Monte Carlo SS engine bay. I would dare say it's a reference for people wanting to restore these things in the future, and even now people are taking these G-bodies very seriously, and they're coming on strong. And again, the Euro nose right here, which is urethane, and it's designed to yield on impact, gentle impact. But again, that's all about aerodynamics. The slope right there helps the car cheat the wind all the better. Speaking of the wind, let's take a look and see what's inside this one under the non-T-top solid roof. Okay, this one's pretty well loaded. It has the velour interior, of course. This maroon right here was standard fare, and it's no leather in these cars or vinyl, just maroon and velour. And center console with the shifter on the floor. These were also available at the front bench, believe it or not, and a column shifted automatic. Standard fare on the Monte Carlo SS was a full rash of gauges. We have a tachometer right there, which reads up to 5,000 RPM, 55. 6 grand, don't go there. It probably won't. It'll go into valve float. And again, very gentle engine, 180 horsepower, the L69, volts, oil pressure, fuel gauge, temperature, etc., and even a speedometer that reads up to 110 miles per hour 115, there you go. So the age of the 85 or 55 mile an hour speedometer and the 85 mile an hour max was coming to an end here in 1988. And under the dash we see a Chapman lock, that device right there, which locks the hood against scoundrels trying to steal your battery. It's still there, it's not active, which is fine, but all these items right here, very pure, correct Monte Carlo SS steering wheel right here with the sort of, it's a rubberized, sort of, it looks like a sporty wheel out of a Ferrari, but it's all plastic, it's GM, and this, you know, leather wrap is also injection molded. It's soft, but it's molded. The stitching's molded in. That's okay. Center console right here. Good to put your stuff right in there. And a good example of how these things work when they were new. And I was a salesman at Ragsdale Chevrolet in 1987 when these cars were on the lot. And these cars came in, I think, 4 or 5 different colors: silver, black, white, burgundy, and I think maybe something else. But with that said, this is a great example of how they were and how they should be maintained and preserved. Okay, let's look in the trunk and learn more about this car's DNA. And before I open that trunk, this one has the standard sedan roofline. The Aero Coupe was something that actually had an extension right here, once again for aerodynamics on NASCAR super speedways. They're pretty rare. I would say of all the Monte Carlo SSs, maybe 20% were Aero Coupes. And again, they were designed to go up against other cars on NASCAR super speedways. And one thing too about 1988, the final year for the Monte Carlo SS, is the trunk spoiler was the lay down variety right here. 1987 and before, this was more vertical. But again, I think they found that this was less drag, perhaps better effective at planting the downforce. I think the same trunk spoiler was used on the Aero Coupe, so they transferred it from the Aero Coupe parts bin to the Monte Carlo SS sedan parts bin. So again, more of a lay down. So if you see a lay down trunk spoiler on a Monte Carlo SS, it's an 88. Okay, let's look inside that trunk and see what we find. And lovely red bow tie, Chevy's NASCAR logo right there. And of course, Monte Carlo SS, the branding in full effect, sharp marketing if ever there was. And on the dealership, on the lot or on the floor, you would totally, your eyes would be drawn to this thing instantly because of all the plumage that it wears. Go inside, here we go, in the trunk. Let's open that puppy. And there it is, you know, fairly commodious trunk lid. Commodious, I might show you $1 every time I say that on camera. I'll send you the check tomorrow, Mike. And inside, plenty of room for suitcases and, you know, none of the cramping of like a smaller car, you know, like a Honda or a Subaru, sorry Shane, or something like that. But here's plenty of room for stuff. The run fat, the mini spare right here, it's for temporary use only. And the point here is basically you'd put this on the car and run for, you know, maybe 50 miles to the service station to fix the flat, which this would allow you to hit the road without the bulk of a full-size spare tire, which would eat some of that commodious trunk space. Mike, another $1 for you coming up real soon. Under the back of the deck lid right here is the SPID, the service parts identification label, and some worthwhile things to see on this is L69, F41 right there, that's the performance suspension, L69, that of course is the 280 horsepower 305, and of course D80, that's the spoiler package, the trunk spoiler, a code right there used throughout Chevrolet history, the D80 spoiler on Z28s in the 1960s and 70s. And again, just a nice example of all the original goodies that are baked into this car's DNA, the SPID, service parts identification. So inside, you know, inside and out, a great looking example of the breed. What I like about this one, it has the factory exhaust system, dual exhaust, catalytic converter onto the floor. And again, it was the 80s. But again, the exhaust tips come down like this. They're unadorned. And they're still there with the baloney cuts for ground clearance on steep grades. Sometimes you have straight pipes, you go up a steep driveway, they drag. Well, Chevy knew that was a problem, so they ground these or cut these on an angle so they would be less obtrusive or damageable. And again, that's the original exhaust system on this 79,000 to just under 80,000 mile, very original example of the breed. So that's the story of this 1988 final year rear-wheel drive G-body Monte Carlo SS, a fun car then or now. To learn more about this car, go to the High-Octane Classics website and examine the photo gallery.